From the microbes in our soil and cells of the human body,
You're making it sound like we've found a cure for cancer.
to exploring the furthest reaches of outer space and the secrets of our deepest oceans,
We're going on a deep dive.
we continue to celebrate Irish science.
This week on 10 Things to Know About, we're scraping beneath the surface to discover the secrets of soil.
Kathriona investigates the DNA in a handful of dirt, and Jonathan tries the not-so-ancient art of bog snorkeling. Soil, one of the most complex structures known to man. A living, breathing ecosystem that is host to a quarter of our planet's biodiversity. Healthy soil gives us clean air and it filters our water. It provides us with our food, our forests and our wildlife. Without soil, there can be no life on Earth. It's as important as the air we breathe.
It does so much for us. It's where our biodiversity lives. It's what gives us our food. It's what cleans our water. It's where all our archaeology is. I mean, the history of humans is really the history of interaction with the soil.
Is all soil the same? Because to me, it looks kind of the same everywhere.
No, far from it. Soil is made up of different sized particles. There's sand, which are larger particles, there's silt, and then there's clay, which is smaller, flat, smooth particles. And the different combination or the different proportions of those particles in your soil decides what type of soil it is. In Ireland, we have 213 different soil types, and each of those will perform and behave a little bit differently. And really appreciating and understanding those differences can help us to devise management practices that can really get the best out of those soils.
We're using an awful lot more of our land. Is the soil being harmed by that?
Yes, it's suggested that soil erosion and soil compaction are the two biggest threats to soil quality in the European Union, obviously in addition to sealing in terms of new pavement.
In 2014, a UK study found that Britain may only have 100 harvests left in its farm soil. Now that's a truly shocking result that may force us to think about our precious soil as a finite resource. So David, 100 harvests left, that's 100 years of crops. That's a very frightening prospect.
It is. We've conducted research on soils and we find similarly that our soil nutrient reserves are being diminished, are being mined over time, and we currently have 90% of our soils, our agricultural soils, are suboptimal in terms of pH, P and K, so nutrients.
Over millennia, rain, wind, sun and ice all help convert rock to soil. Nutrients such as carbon, nitrogen and phosphorus are then stored and recycled within that soil to provide food for our crops to grow.
So how do we find out about the health of our soil?
We're standing here in a pit, so this is one of the perfect ways to have a look at the soil in situ. We have this upper horizon, or A horizon, and you'll notice that that's darker. So that's where our carbon is stored. And we see here we have a large abundance of roots in here. For a good structure, we want to have something like this. There's more pore space and more room for both air and water.
So it's important actually that it's crumbling, it's letting in the air, it's letting in the worms can work around it.
Yes, in this part of the soil it is very good. We can also see here we have an old wheel mark here, and in this part of the soil over here, the soil is a little bit harder. You can see it's not breaking down into that small crumb. When we move down a little bit further, we get into what we call the B horizon. So this is closer to the original rock that the soil was derived from. If I just jab in the knife a little bit, you can see here right under this wheel mark, it's very, very compact, very, very dense. So that damage has been conveyed deeper into the profile. It's quite hard.
Okay.
If you try to break those.
Oh gosh, it's like a rock almost. Okay.
Yeah, so that is a problem and a lot more harder to remediate.
Right. So I find this fascinating. Purely by driving over this little section here, we're actually damaging the potential of drainage. So if we get more rain, this section of the soil isn't going to be able to get rid of that water.
Exactly.
And you might not think of it, but it's the living creatures that live and die within that make soil hospitable for other living forms. Some of the most important actors in keeping our soils healthy are our wriggly friends.
A worm will consume somewhere in the region of 20 to 40 tonnes of soil per hectare per year.
Wow.
They are truly nature's plough, very, very important for opening up the soil in terms of pore space. In a hectare of soil, to the top 5 centimetres, just down to about there, you have 1.5 million pores being generated by earthworms.
So we actually need to have the earthworm.
Really, really important.
And how many earthworms would it take to run a farm, basically?
Studies that we've conducted and that has been conducted elsewhere shows that the stocking rate, so if we have a stocking rate in terms of animals on the surface, there's equal amount of worms underneath the soil.
Okay.
In terms of weight.
Oh,
by
wow.
quantity.
Worms and plant roots help to create wide channels in the soil called macropores, but there are also large areas with microspaces between the grains of sand, silt and clay. Part of Sara's research focuses on that proportion ratio across different types of soil.
Soil that has a lot of macropores can transmit raw water very readily. It might be more prone to nutrient losses, such as nitrate through leaching, but also it would probably be very good for tillage. It would easily supply water to the plants. If you have a heavier soil, it's going to be a lot more poorly drained.
So Sara, your research directly relates to what farmers will be doing on the land around the country.
Yes, absolutely. Our specific mission is to look at the water quality of Ireland and how agricultural land management affects that water quality. And you think, well, why are you here in soil research then? But the thing is that soil and water are so intrinsically linked to one another that you can't really understand one without studying the other.
Sara uses a device called an infiltrometer to measure how much water can drain through the soil at a given time. She drives a bladed ring into the ground until it's completely flush, and this creates a sealed chamber within the soil. Sara then fills the chamber with water, and the rate of this water moving into the soil is measured using a pressure transducer.
That'll allow us to tell how much water is being infiltrated into the soil over time. The computer runs the mathematics on it, and then it gives us out the values of hydraulic conductivity.
So we know that soil structure impacts water retention and conductivity, but Sara and her colleagues at Teagasc also want to find out how soil structure impacts on the microbiology of the soil. Katrina's meeting Fiona Brennan to find out more.
Fiona Brennan is a soil and environmental microbiologist based in the labs of Teagasc Johnstown.
Many people would think of soil as an inert substances, but actually the soil is brimming full of life. The whole soil is alive. And more than a quarter of all organisms on the planet are found in soil.
Wow.
So in terms of diversity, it's amazing.
So it's kind of bacteria, fungi, all the microbiome that we kind of think of in terms of humans and what we're starting to understand there. You're starting to understand that in soil science.
Exactly. Just like humans have a microbiome, organisms associated with them, soils also have it. And in fact, soil is much more complex than anything we found on ourselves.
Fiona is investigating how the microbial community in the soil is affected by compaction, which can occur through the pressure of a tractor tilling the field. She collects samples from compacted and uncompacted areas of the field, freezes them in liquid nitrogen and brings them back to the lab to extract the DNA profile.
How many microbes do you expect to find in a sample like this?
Well, a healthy soil can contain more than 100 million bacteria, believe it or not, and 50 kilometres of fungal mycelium. So it's just mind-blowing.
Mind-blowing!
First thing we need to do is put them in the bead beater there.
Bead beater.
Bead beater. And off we go.
Fiona and Aoife clean and filter out contaminants and chemicals from the DNA, so they're left with a tiny sample containing the pure DNA code, which they mix with colour dye to help visualise it. And they're even giving me a go.
So I suck up the DNA.
Yeah.
No.
I think you have it.
Do I? Oh yeah, I do.
See it?
God, it's such tiny amounts. And then suck up the dye. Oh, mix it in with the dye. So push it all the way down.
Yeah, perfect. You might give it another little mix because it's Still a bit of a blob there.
Yeah.
This is my first time though. Come on, give us a break.
Yeah, fair play.
Oh God, you're such patient people scientists. I think I might have missed it. Yeah, I'd say now that one.
Thank you very
job.
much. I think that one, you will discount that one and just go off of Aoife's ones.
So this is the gel actually that we've taken from the tank, and we have it visualized under UV light. And what you can actually see is the bands of DNA there at the top. That's the shiny light things. It doesn't look shredded or anything, and it's fully intact, the strong bands. So the extraction has worked really well.
Okay, so this information is telling you there's X amount of bacteria and X amount of whatever fungi.
Exactly. And what we do then is we try and tie this in with process data. So when we're looking at a particular transformation in soil, changing a nutrient from one form to another, we actually want to replicate that in the lab. And we'll give them idealized conditions and then see how much gas they will produce under different conditions.
So they'll give off different greenhouse gases depending on what they're exposed to.
Yes, exactly. And the real strength is combining the different parts. We have the microbial, we have the actual gas being produced, and then we can link that back to the physical and the chemical information that David and Sara have got from the field.
And is the ultimate aim to kind of create a model where you're able to say, well, in County Cork, we expect these kind of microbial communities based on different physical constraints?
That would be the dream. And hopefully in my lifetime, maybe we'll see it. It's a long way off yet, but that's exactly where we're hoping to
Okay, so come back to you in like 25 years' time?
Absolutely.
Okay, 25 years' time. Grand. What can we do to mind our soil?
I think the most important thing is not to degrade the physical structure. So for farmers, being careful that they're not damaging the soil by either heavy machinery or animals out in the soil, and maintaining their pHs, and in general, making sure that we're not over-applying chemicals or insecticides or pesticides. And even old farming practices that have somewhat gone out of fashion, like liming your soil, can be really important in terms of the communities that are in soil and are great for keeping a healthy microbiome.
So giving your soil some tender, loving care, really.
Exactly. And also you and me in our gardens, we can also be mindful of the soil and look after it in a way that it'll...
Well, I just leave my soil alone and never touch it, so that's my way of doing it.
Well, that's probably a very good way of doing things, Kathriona, and actually when soil is left alone, it often does very well.
Oh, I have a really healthy soil population, so I'm fine.
Good.
Soil science conducted by Fiona, David and Sara is hugely important to the continued success of Ireland's largest export market, our agricultural and dairy industries.
We have a unique combination of soil type and climate that allows us to produce grass at a really great quality. And this really supports our dairy industry, and obviously that dairy is now exported all over the world. It's a premium product.
So while we probably think of the visuals, the cows, the farmers, the grass, etc., we should be very grateful about our soil as well.
Absolutely. For all the work that you see above the ground, there's just as much work going on under the ground.
We've heard of the saying, let them eat cake, but perhaps a more apt saying might have been, let them eat dirt. Geophagy, or the desire to eat soil, is not your latest smashed avocado and sourdough hipster trend. In fact, soil in small quantities has been a staple food of humans going back millennia. But why? Well, plants contain many self-protecting but human-harming toxins that have narrowed the range of vegetables that humans have eaten throughout history. Some foods, like bitter potatoes, contain toxins that can induce stomach pain and vomiting. And this is where soil comes in, and specifically clay. Clay is small in size but big in surface area, allowing it to bind with these toxins, carrying them through the gut to be excreted by the body without ever entering the bloodstream. And by creating a clay and water slurry, or curry if you will, potatoes are dipped and dunked before being devoured. The protective clay coating gives people a much greater degree of flexibility in their diet, which is particularly valuable in times of famine. In fact, in many market stalls across the developing world, soil is sold not by the wheelbarrow, but rather by the mouthful. So the next time you're standing over the sink with a mountain of dirt-covered potatoes to wash, perhaps this story might give you some pause or food for thought. See you next time.
Jonathan,
How are you, Declan?
are you all set for the bog snorkeling, yeah?
No, I'm not.
Good, good, good. Well, very quickly I'll explain.
Right.
Just 2 rules.
Yeah.
Snorkel stays in the mouth at all times.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
And no conventional swimming. Okay, so you can't break the water. So it's doggy paddle and flipper power.
Okay. Oh, it's soupy. Every September, nutters from all around the country travel far and wide to take part in the Bog Snorkeling Championships. Last year's record was an impressive 1 minute and 39 seconds. Let's see how I get on. Wish me luck.
Go!
Oh, I'm wrecked. But all this messing around in the bog isn't just to make me look stupid. There's a far more serious side to it. Events like these aim to highlight the plight of our few remaining peat bogs, only 20% of which remain near intact. Peatlands are crucial for biodiversity, carbon storage, and ultimately climate change. Increasing awareness and protecting these bogland areas is something that Dr. Florence Renew Wilson has been passionate about for decades. Flo, you can feel it underfoot. It's like a mattress, this soil. Why is peat bog so different to the sort of soil that we grow crops in?
Well, Jonathan, this is peat, so this is not your typical ordinary soil. Well, this is quite unique. In fact, on the planet, there's only 3% of the land that has this type of soil, but in Ireland we have 25% of that, and but very few people know that this 25% is very, very rare and very precious indeed. This is organic matter, so this is living stuff that lived thousands of years ago and has just failed to decompose. So when you have a leaf falling on any ground, in 97% of the world, even in the ocean, it will decompose. It will return to molecules and return to the air. Here, that leaf that fell 8,000 years ago in that bog, it stays in the peat intact.
When I think of peat bog, I think of bog bodies, and I suppose that's the same thing, right? It's this soil that is great at preserving things.
Exactly, and there's more. There's bog bodies, but there's also lots of artifacts, leather, shoes, all sorts of things we found. When it falls into this environment, which is very hostile, it's wet, it's acidic, and it doesn't decompose, so then it keeps on very slowly growing over millennia. And that's why it's fascinating, because it's a history book. Men typically don't like fetid wetlands that smells, because there's a smell of it, and they wanted to drain it to use it for agriculture. But as soon as you drain it or cut it, oxygen comes in, and then it becomes like any other soil. Because it's not wet anymore, it will start decomposing, and CO2 goes back into the atmosphere.
Because these plants have absorbed CO2 over a long period of time, and presumably then are a perfect storage facility for that.
That's right.
Right.
Your mattress here, it's actually storing carbon for us, and very few things in the world are doing that. You know, there's far more carbon in all the peat bogs around the world than the whole tropical forest. And
Wow.
the problem is nobody sees it because it's underneath us.
Peat bogs are important reservoirs for carbon. However, when they're damaged, this sink function is actually reversed. Draining and drying turf releases significant amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere.
There's a big culture of turf cutting in this country, though. How do you balance the needs of farmers and the environment?
Turf cutting is a traditional activity and will go on. We have nearly 1.4 million hectares of peatland in this country, so most of it has been affected by turf cutting. We only have a very tiny proportion that is still intact, that should be protected, that is protected, so we have to balance it.
As part of her research, Florence and her PhD students take core samples from peat bogs to identify characteristics such as carbon and water content, acidity, and even the smell.
This is the first 50 centimeters or so of the bog. It's already fascinating what you can see. So Killian here is going to scrape it. First thing you see is that you can actually see the plants that have mostly made the peat.
Yeah.
And they're here.
Oh, gosh, it's really wet.
Yeah, look at that.
So this is plants of tens of years ago.
Oh, yeah, hundreds. And smell it? So it's quite, there's a particular smell to it. It could be quite sulfuric at some point.
It's quite nice, actually.
Yeah.
The team's research aims to determine whether peat properties change depending on the location within a specific bog, and also across different locations around the country.
What we're trying to find out, really, is all this peat we have in Ireland, how much of it, how deep is our bog, so how much carbon we have. And also, are they likely to be more prone to drought, for instance, in the future, or should we restore them? Are they more likely to be wet easily, and so on and so forth?
This work continues to highlight the benefits of re-wetting degraded peatlands to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and, crucially, help restore the natural carbon sink function of pristine peatlands.
What you have in front of you here is really the last Irish wilderness. We have to understand their multiple benefits for Irish populations, for mankind, their biodiversity, their benefits for carbon absorption, for storage. We are discovering every day more and more about their potential and how they can help us, for instance, combat climate change. We need to keep studying them, understanding them, protecting them before it's too late.
That's our 10 things to know about soil. Next week, we're looking at the complexities of human memory.
Oh, I so didn't get this right.